Hi everyone, on this podcast, you will get the latest in AI technology for go-to-market teams, where we're going to explore how to use this evolving technology to uncover more revenue for your business. I'm Sheikh Shahi. Over the last 5 years, I've built a $20 million revenue engine for one of the UK's top startups, and most recently launched a business in Japan where we hit 50 B2B customers in 9 months.
And I'm Lewis Stock. Whilst building with Shay everything he just mentioned, I orchestrated the GTM AI engine, which we're now productionizing as we co-found together NXL.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 3, and today we're going to talk about the role that gets misunderstood more than any other in the GTM, which is the SDR. Before we get going, Lewis, how are you?
Thank you for asking, Shay. I'm feeling strong before this one. I've gone and bought myself a little professional microphone, so I'm hoping the sound quality is good.
You're getting serious, mate. You're getting very serious.
Yeah, we're going to have to see your ring light coming out soon.
Yeah.
I think what's exciting is I'm coming to see you in Dubai next week, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, so we're actually doing an event in Dubai on the 5th of February. Lewis and I are going to be there that entire week. So if anyone listening is in Dubai that week, just reach out to us. We'd love to grab a coffee, talk about AI, talk about GTM.
Nice. Okay, let's get to it. So as a reminder, we're currently in the middle of a mini-series about the best we've ever worked with. So we started with the best content marketer, top of funnel, and now we're moving our way through to SDR, so the sales development rep.
Yeah, so this is, first thing I want to just say is this is a hard role. And I think that's definitely underappreciated. Spending every single day of your life cold calling, sending emails is a tough job. Very important one. So respect to all the SDRs out there. But here's the truth from my perspective. If you're genuinely selling a product that solves a customer's need, why wouldn't you reach out to people? Why wouldn't you pick up the phone and talk to them? At the end of the day, they are the ones with the problem and you're the ones with the solution. Pick up the phone, speak to them.
It's a hard role. It's people historically probably see it in two ways. Like the two ends of the spectrum is one, either you're a mass cold caller, you're grinding, and it is a brutal role, right? When you're doing that, sending thousands of emails, calls, doing that all manually, that's really hard. And then the other end, there's the people who are really targeted. They're customizing, they're high emotional intelligence, but they trade that off, that personalization off against the volume.
Absolutely, yeah. That is the key, right? They did the SDRs you're talking about. They did the extra 1%. The specific reference that you find on a client, the human tone, the detail that made the prospect feel seen. And by the way, when we're talking about SDRs, we're not talking about just junior employees. We're talking about anyone could be an SDR, right? We're talking about founders. We're talking about senior leadership team members. Lewis, in Japan, we were doing everything, right? We were doing GTM, we were doing every part of the GTM, we were running the P&L. But I would say, 60 to 70% of our time was spent SDRing, especially in the beginning when we had to build a network, right? And if we wanted to kind of build that network, we were really mapping out who we wanted to target and how we wanted to get to them. I've actually got a story about how we signed probably the biggest deal we did in Japan, which was a big media agency. And it was basically my ability to follow up with the person to the point where they got sick of me is essentially how we sold this deal. So I had initially messaged him I remember it was in November of 2024. I messaged him on LinkedIn. He connected with me on LinkedIn, and I tried to book some time with him at the time, and it kind of didn't happen. But then basically, I just kept following up with him to add value. I kept inviting him to events. I sent him white papers, and he was sick. He couldn't come to one event. He couldn't come to the other event. But I would say every kind of 4 to 6 weeks, I was messaging him, trying to add value in some way. And it wasn't until 6 to 7 months later where he came to one of those events. I connected with him in person at the event. I asked him how it was. I found out he had He had a 2-year-old. I had a 2-year-old. We booked lunch with him afterwards. And then I found out his team was doing a benefit review, and he basically introduced me to his team, right? And that was purely outbound, and that's a story of just like SDR grind, but there was a whole bunch of effort that also went into kind of outbounding and champion building with that person. We spent time with each other. We actually ended up being really, really good friends. But I think that's like a combination of it's the grind plus the champion building and understanding the emotional side of sales as well.
Yeah, it's nice. When you do this right, you end up friends, and I think that's again going back to the misconception at the start is that this is a value, something you're offering value, and most SDRs or people who are essentially the role is, and the best people who do this, they're generating pipeline and they're the biggest pipeline generators. They totally understand that. I guess what's nice about this mini series, we call it the best we worked with, but your example's about us. So, but I think that's the key thing is your credibility is really important in this role. And we spoke about content last time. I think building content from traditionally a junior employee and adding value and being authentic, that can be quite difficult, and that's why I think sometimes the best people you ever work with in this role are those that have more credibility and seniority or know how to add value. I think that's a really, really interesting concept that how do you open doors and get above that noise is leveraging those aspects of who you are and the nature of the whole machine that you've built around you. Yeah. So in terms of, I guess where we're going here, the question is junior employees or junior SDRs, someone straight out of uni, that's the traditional role when we say SDR. And that role itself has, a limited lifespan. It's 12 to 24 months before someone wants to move on because it's such a hard grind. Why is that? Like, why do people focus there?
Yeah, and I think it's not to say that junior SDRs are bad in any way. I think they do an incredible job and they put a lot of effort in. And then you get some who really understand the product and service and can solve a lot of problems, right? Ultimately, but to just solely rely on that as for a business is a massive risk, right? Especially as you said, the lifespan being 12 to 24 months. It's just a big risk. There's a lot of burnout associated with the role. It's a really, really challenging role, right? And I think the beautiful thing now is that AI does give an ability to really leverage senior credibility without burning people out. And without relying solely on the junior people. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail with examples in the beginning. But I just want to strip it back for a second and talk about the different definitions of being an SDR. So in our minds, and you're going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say before you jump in is the point you're making is really interesting, right? Because traditionally you would have had 10, 20, 30 people cold calling on your behalf, and that's really expensive for a business. And where you're starting to go here is actually, do you need to have so many people doing something that's actually not that enjoyable? Or could you be using them to build brands, to do the effective things that build relationships and champions? And that's a better way of spending your business money and ultimately lowering your cost of acquisition per lead.
Yeah. You're right. You do have many businesses who invest massively in these SDR teams, but there's the old school term of before SDRs even became a huge thing. The term SDR, it was like the 360 rep, and the 360 rep was able to do everything, right? They had to go hunt for their business. They have to do outbound, do outreach, and ultimately sell all the deals themselves. I think AI gives the ability to have more of that, whilst also there still being a place for SDRs and it gives them an ability to 10x their output as well. So I think it's an interesting viewpoint, really. But let me strip it back. So when we're talking about SDRs, we're talking about an inbound SDR and we're talking about an outbound SDR. So with an inbound, we're talking about SDRs who deal with inbound leads, who are basically people who raise their hand and have expressed some interest in your product or service, right? So that's how we define inbound. And on the outbound side, it's more focused on cold calling and reaching out to prospects totally cold. One thing I would want to kind of clarify here, and I kind of go on about this a lot, is that, inbound and outbound are the same engine ultimately, right? We have two definitions for it, but they're really linked to each other. If you think about inbound, what is it? It's, producing content, it's doing events, it's running ads, it's PR. But what it does, it basically, it's brand building, right? But what it does is it makes you familiar, to your business familiar to your total addressable market, right? And then outbound stops feeling so cold ultimately, right? You get better replies, you get, better responses, people trust you more. And then on the outbound side, what are you doing? You're doing cold calling, you're doing emails, you're doing follow-ups. You're also creating awareness, right? Every cold call you make to an individual, every conversation you have, someone knows your brand. I remember in Japan, we had hundreds of conversations outbound. And as a result, people started to know the brand we were selling at the time, ULife, much better. And they, we were almost doing the inbound, but in an outbound capacity, right? So when you do outbound like that, you make inbound hit much harder, higher engagement, better conversion rates, more trust.
Nice. And so you spoke about that kind of 360 rep. Is it possible to have inbound and outbound at the same time from the same person in the traditional sense?
So, yeah, it's absolutely possible. I think it's definitely possible. But I think ultimately, as a CRO function, you need to find a way that your reps don't just prioritize inbound, because, reps that get too focused on inbound, if, you may be having a great year or a great quarter, generating lots of leads, but a lot of the time what ends up happening is inbound lead volume could drop, whether that be because of competition, whether that be because of the market, whatever it might be, right? And in that, at that point, your reps need to be able to be comfortable and used to doing outbound. And if they're solely relying on inbound, it really can mess up the operating rhythm, is what I've experienced.
Yeah, and there's some businesses that can be reliant on inbound, right? But they're few and far between. They've got either a big brand voice working with them, or they're a household name. But most businesses, I would say, the large majority, especially of us SMEs, we're going out there, we're trying to be heard. And if you rely too much on inbounds, that cost can get so high. If people start competing for those terms that you're bidding on for paid ads, if you're relying totally on that, when it stops, your business is in trouble, because pipeline is king, and if you don't have pipeline, you can't generate it, then it can be really tough.
Yeah. So let's just go back, stick on inbound for itself. Inbounds come in, people express interest. Now at this point, many companies do have an inbound SDR who'd call that person, ask them a series of questions and then book a longer meeting with an AE. That's kind of like a very traditional model that people use across the board. So I do want to point out at this stage that I'm generally not a huge fan of this model. And I actually feel that if people are actively looking at your products and services and raising your hand, in a perfect world, you'd have AEs picking up the phone and not necessarily junior SDRs, right? At the last business, we put in an SLA that basically said that people had to follow up with inbound leads within 5 minutes. And for a while, it was actually working, right? And it was AEs that were following up at the time, right? Conversion rates improved drastically. And there is actually a stat that says that if you follow up within 5 minutes of a lead coming in, you increase your chance of converting that lead by 70%. And we did actually see that, right? But here's the issue that people don't see. Once you start expecting your AEs to call inbound leads within 5 minutes, there is actually a knock-on effect, because their brains actually start gravitating towards inbound and they actually end up neglecting outbound. So that's definitely a challenge across the board. And I wonder if there's a way that AI could somehow help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's where we're moving with what we're saying with the best we've ever worked with is that combination of volume and emotional intelligence. That's what we said at the beginning of this podcast. I think it helps where you're giving people the ability to focus on doing both. If the time it takes to be constantly on and responding in 5 minutes, always checking your phone, you're never going to be plugged into that focus time for 2-3 hours to go do your outbound or whatever it might be. So in terms of, we like being practical. Every episode we said, let's get practical. I think there's two ways for inbound that we can look at a combination of power suiting a human, putting AI on top of them to be rapid responders, and then also supporting them totally with AI. So I think the first one's a great example of it was a live example I had, and it changed my mind on it. You've mentioned the SLA of under 5 minutes. You're much more likely to book that lead in than to be qualified and go through to sell. That small 5 minute window is top of their mind. Now, I was having brunch with a CEO of a business the other day. It was a Sunday morning. I was at the table. They were talking about some tools that they were using. I was like, you should check this one out. Filled out the form on the website. Within 5 minutes, even on a Sunday morning, obviously their system had gone and qualified the lead. It was a CEO of a nicely profitable business right in the ICP clearly. Someone from the C-suite of that brand, they filled the form out, called him and already understood who that person was, who my friend was, and also how they could help them, and they booked that call in for Monday, ready to go. Now that you can't do without complex workflows, research agents, being able to qualify your ICP, etc. Push it out to if the person coming onto your website meets a certain criteria, like they're the C-suite of your perfect ICP, that goes straight to your founder to call them as an example, or someone your CRO. Now that is like an amazing journey, and it's super impressive. And for me, the response, we were like, wow, I want to work with that company, because if they're going to help, if that's what they're doing internally, think of how much they can help my business. And so it just creates that whole aura around it, and you're excited to meet them on Monday. The demo is probably going to go better because you're going to be more open. So I think that's one way that you can really combine AI and human.
Okay, that is a great way. And in a perfect world, for an inbound lead to come in, the founder of the business is driving with their family somewhere, or I don't know, on a demo call. They park their car across the road. They get out and they call the inbound lead, and within 5 minutes. That's super impressive. But the reality is that can't always happen, right? You could be at a customer meeting that lasts an hour, and you literally can't get off the phone. Whatever it might be, there's many reasons that can't happen. So, in the scenarios where that can't happen, how can AI help?
Yeah, totally. So I think the second example is now where you start to go to that more volume play. And the best examples I've seen of people using it and how we've built it is businesses will say have 5 to 10 categories of how an inbound comes in and what they want. And it's once you know those categories and start creating logic base around how people are going to interact with you online, you then have the ability to email and also voice call using AI. Now, voice calling with outbound on a B2B complex sale, I don't think technology is there yet. It will be, I've got no doubt. But I don't think there's any problem at the moment if within a few minutes, from an inbound perspective, you're getting a call from someone who's understood those 10 categories and said, okay, within this, I just want to ask a couple of questions so you get the most out of the meeting, and making sure that they can make that time they've booked in. That's a really nice way of, one, ensuring there's value coming up. Two, people go, okay, these guys really care. They're also an efficient system. They're super busy. They've got loads of leads. So they're obviously a good quality product. So I think that's a really nice use of voice AI. And say you can't get hold of them on the phone because not everyone's available, you can then do it over email, and you can build it in a way which understands context, it reasons, and it can reply, a couple of replies to whatever the clarification points are. A lot of those situational questions which help you qualify. And ultimately, if you are getting lots of inbound leads, qualification is so important. You don't want to be flooded with, time with your AEs that is never going to become opportunities. And so you can actually qualify out this way. Now, the one danger that people want to talk about is what happens if it's not within those 5 to 10 categories. Now, there's always, if there's uncertainty, you just build into your model that it pushes out to a human. But the key is here, you've reduced a massive volume of inbounds and qualification at the start, and actually anything that gets that pushed up to a human and is an edge case, that's great. That's where your AE and your people can take over.
So in that scenario, let me just paint the picture there. So you've got an inbound lead that comes in, and instead of an AE or a founder or whoever it might be picking up the phone and calling that inbound lead, you have got an inbound AI SDR who calls within 1 minute, let's say, most probably, because you can program it in that way, asks a series of qualification questions, and then based on the qualification, books a meeting immediately in the diary of an AE, right? Is that's what you're describing?
Exactly, yeah, and it's I think the qualification is important, especially for high volume lead businesses, where ultimately we're looking at cost of acquisition of a lead here, and if people are coming inbound, you've got you spent a lot of money on paid ads, and they're not the right ICP. You don't want to be serving those up to your top AEs. You'd rather an SDR potentially speaks to them, qualifies them, nurtures them, or they get qualified out. So I think it's that process of qualifying out, but it's also making sure you add value during that process to the qualified lead. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, and I do think it will work, because ultimately, some people will be looking at it and thinking, well, it's an AI. I don't want to speak to an AI, but as long as the AI is adding value at the point of when you're conversing with them, that's what it's all about, right? If it can do the job that you want it to do, when you fill out a form on a website, you do want to be contacted quickly, and you do want a meeting to be set in your diary most of the time, not always, right? So, and if the AI can provide a means to do that, then I don't see it being a problem with people speaking to the AI. Now, there is also like a sorry, what did you say?
No, I think it's interesting because you're going down the point of we're validating that because the biggest objection we hear is, do people want to speak to AI, and do they know it's AI? Now over email you wouldn't know. They write
Yeah.
just as well as you and I. It's just over this voice, and we've seen that for both it's worked. But I think there's definitely a validation here of 2026 is the year that people get over this question that you're discussing now. Will people want to speak to them? Because it's become such a part of our daily lives and all our interactions that this is if we see this and we work out in your business with their context of adding value, then it's about output and outcomes. People will value this as a
Yeah,
customer.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There is a flip side to it as well. So, obviously, in a perfect world, you will have a really high performing salesperson pick up the phone, and within 5 minutes, they're gonna book a meeting and they're gonna speak to the customer. But we know that that's not. We don't live in a perfect world, and that's not always possible, right? So, I also don't think it's a bad thing that if you are a high performing person that solves people's problem, you're not always going to be available to your customer, right? And status is an important thing in sales, right? And you want your customers to think of you as someone who is not always available, so they can't always pick up the phone within 5 minutes because you're busy out there being a superhuman and solving problems left, right, and center. Is the way I see it. And that's why I think there is an opportunity here with this inbound AI SDR to do the initial qualification, and then just, as long as they can book the call at the point in which they're speaking to the customer at a time where the high performing salesperson is available, why not?
Yeah, this is the big thing I think which gets forgotten when we're building SDRs and SDR machines is this whole emotional side to selling, right? Is you have pains and problems, whatever the model, people look at internally, they might use medic and they look at pain, you might have band and you look at need. That's your logic, and that's the, how do we do process, how do we identify, how do we qualify? But then when it comes to the champion side and it comes to building you as a salesperson, having that credibility, that status, that's really important part of that. The FOMO, the psychology of it all is a really important part that people will overlook. And actually, in reality, if you are a business that is working really well, really successful, and in people wanting to buy you, you don't have the time to take on every single conversation, and that's a really great way of elevating your social status. If we break it down into words, it sounds it's kind of like the school playground, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a really interesting concept. So, okay, so we've talked about inbound, we've talked about how AI could be used in the inbound sales process for good. So that's cool. So let's talk about outbound. And what's the big challenge around outbound at the moment? And it's been a challenge not just this year with AI. It's been a challenge for, I would say, many years now, probably for the last 5, 6, 7 years, where everyone's using the same generic trigger points, job alerts. It's becoming harder and harder to be noticed. Email is getting way more crowded. So how can AI help there?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Is sequences have been around for ages. They've all been built into our CRM. So mass emailing's been happening for a while now. I don't think outbound via email, whatever the platform you use online, is dead. If you can create a good machine that's personalized and adding value, and you hit someone at the right point, you will get responses. So I think that is something totally that you do not need humans writing out personalized emails anymore. That's a crazy concept, right? But the key here is, how do you find people at the right time? And if
Yeah.
you're using generic triggers, everyone's using those now. Job change, etc. You need to layer on top of that with the right signals. Intent data has been a big thing. It's becoming more and more commoditized amongst businesses in terms of they're all getting those same intent signals. So then it's, how do I differentiate myself as a business and really understand who I should be messaging, and therefore you then set your AI to personalize it and do all these great things that have been around for a while. Things that we've explored that I think is really important is, how do you take, for example, live feedback from what you're hearing on your customer calls, from prospects, current customers. There's so much information in there that tell you about the industry, about what's happening, about their competitors. Those should be directly feeding into your SDR, and that the best SDRs will know that, putting those dots together. People who are, we see a lot of stuff around looking at socials now and interactions. As we were speaking before around credibility and building, if you're just connecting with someone on LinkedIn and then you're not commenting and interacting with them as well, how can you expect for them to see you as someone who's actually real and wanting to them? And I think there's a whole way of using AI to speed up that process. It's really hard to think of those comments, right? We're not saying send out thousands of comments on LinkedIn and automate that whole process, but automating the thinking and ability to apply it to what you're seeing authentically. That's a way you completely differentiate and get people in the moment.
Yeah, I love that. I think I totally agree, and it's ultimately it's the combination of the human being and using these AI tools, which is what is going to basically go against the noise that's out there, and what's going to make you stand out as an individual, whether that be a founder, whether that be whoever that might be, right? And I think being able to use these new series of intent signals with the power of AI is going to be key, right? So for example, I love the idea that now you can essentially go to an event, you can have a speaking slot event. So you have, 30, 40, 50 people who are, watching you speak about different problems that you're addressing. You could take that speaker list, upload it into a system, enrich it within seconds, and follow up with the people who were actually there connecting with you as a human being. So that's a great example of you've gone there, you've connected with a human being, and then you've leveraged AI as almost your power suit to do the follow up when you don't have time.
Yeah, and I think just to layer on top of that, just take it to the next level, is what you're saying there is like a really advanced workflow that just makes it very easy for you as a person to go from in person to digital interaction and record it and add value. But the thing sometimes that gets overlooked about capabilities is AI can see now. So you are able to put an image, and we've all put images into Gemini, ChatGPT, and it reads all the text within it. Now, when you go to events, you go to small intimate things, 20 to 30 people. There's usually a table plan, or there's a list of people, a brochure with the speaker name, their company. If you can have something that has name plus one detail that identifies them, you can just snap a photo of that, upload it into that same workflow, and enrich it so that instead of forgetting who you spoke to, you then have all of your notes that you could voice note afterwards, link it up to that, and suddenly you've got these amazing personalised messages that would have taken literally a whole day, or you might not have just done it. And suddenly you've got these people that never would have interacted again, suddenly becoming part of your community, and you're adding value.
Yeah. Yeah, this you've just made me think of an example actually, and we both know it. So Lauren, who is someone that is a CMO of ULife, we've worked with for many years. She is a hustler, and she's always at these events. She's meeting people. She's got speaking slots. She's connecting with other speakers, and I think this type of AI would be an unbelievable differentiator for her, because she's constantly, she can feed all the people that she's meeting, all the people that she's, conversed with over the last however long, and then follow up in the way that in a way that sounds like her, and in a way that understands her and is contextual. I think that's the key, right?
Yeah, so good. So now we're hoping that Lawrence listens to this episode, because maybe we shouldn't message her. See if she hears the call out.
Well, maybe she could get her AI that you built her to listen to it and then trigger
Yeah.
us a WhatsApp message or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other things that I think, a few other practical examples that served me pretty well in Japan was when I was trying to find someone in my ICP and target people, I was using AI to, find potential warm introductions, identify, who was best in my network that could introduce that person, craft the messaging for that person. All of that stuff really, really helps. Even, I think I mentioned this in a previous podcast, but like if I can't do that, I'd actually use AI to find out what events the people would be at, and I'd get myself to that event and connect with that individual. So it's all these like little trigger points that goes above just like, an intent signal that says someone has raised funding, or, you need to be thinking much deeper and really using that power of human and AI in parallel. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck in the noise.
I think this is the theme that's coming out from our whole series, and also what we're building is, let's put that power suit on top of someone. There's nothing better than getting to an event and shaking hands. And so understanding how you can do that efficiently and researching, that's the hard bit. If all of that's being done for you, then it's just about getting yourself there in person, enjoying the moment, ultimately what we're trying to do is enjoy the journey. And this is what this is making happen. Going back to the start, is the SDR role can be a grind, and suddenly it's becoming a joyful experience where you can go to events and know that you're going to meet someone, and that's going to add value, and you're going to create a relationship with them that can turn into friendship, like your example.
Absolutely. Great. So we've talked about inbound SDRs. We've talked about outbound SDRs. We've talked about how AI can serve to accelerate those particular roles. I think we've also made the point around, it's not just about junior employees, but everyone can be an SDR in this world of AI. What's the conclusion? What's the future of this role?
So look, spray and pray, I don't think it's where we're going. Maybe there's going to be some transactional products where it'll work for, but when we're looking at the products we're speaking about, mainly B2B consultative sales, where we're adding value and you've got to understand pain and champion, that spray and pray is never going to work. The classic workflow automation. This is around activating people's credibility. It's moving away from thinking it just has to be a junior employee who's grinding. It's the idea that we can reduce the cost of acquisition by using AI to support with inbound. It's to do the research, to understand those offline interactions. And so, I don't think the role is dead. Ultimately, the SDR role, most businesses are known, and you have to get known. And it can't just be brand and marketing. And I think it's that understanding that you need to leverage all those people within the business to be the SDR, and use your whole machine. That's where now this role is going, and where it's going to come alive.
Couldn't have put it any better myself. So 100% agree. I think if you're a CEO, a senior leadership team member listening to this, I always got a message at the end of the podcast for the CROs and CMOs and CEOs. You could be your organization's best SDR. You've got the credibility, people want to hear from you, and now you've got the AI tools that can make it so much easier. And coming from me, I can tell you, having run RevOps functions, your teams will absolutely love you, because you're getting into the trenches with them, and you're part of the team. And I think that's really, really important in today's world. So get involved.
Nice. So you can find us at www.yournextlevel.io. And Shay, I'm looking forward to seeing you in Dubai and hosting our event next week. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be great. Thanks everyone for listening. See you on the next episode.
Bye.